Well, welcome to number 2 wine club for us. This is the December 2021 edition, and this is our second crack at it. And the first one, a lot of good feedback. We had some great wines, and a lot of people took photos and slash videos of them having a party at home. So that was nice. So if you want to, feel free to send us photos or how you enjoy the evening, because a lot of people did have friends over and then watch this on the on whatever screen they had. Some do have big screens in their houses, I see. So hopefully we come off okay on a big screen format, and hopefully not too many K. Hopefully it was just low res. And so there we go. And as always, I will be the cheerleader, because we have the brains here, Todd, who selected the wines. And he knows all about them, and I don't, as you will clearly see. So Todd, do you want to have at it?
Yeah, welcome. Thanks. Glad to be doing this for the second month. Just quickly, I'm just going to flash on the screen the order we're going to taste in. So we're going to start with the Muxow Dom Rafael Bronco as our first wine. Our second wine, we are going to do the Terra Vista Vineyards Focus Series 100% Roussanne. Wine number 3 is the Castel and Villa Chianti Classico. And wine number 4 is the Freemark Abbey Napa Valley Merlot. So there we go. That's the order. I like to have a little progression. We're going to go kind of from lightest to richest. So jumping right into it, wine number 1 is the Dom Rafael bottling, the Bronco. They do a red and a white of this wine. My wife and I were lucky enough to visit this winery just a few months ago when we were on vacation. We went to Portugal. There in the south in an area called Alentejo, which is probably the least populated area of Portugal. It's very sparse, not a lot of people that live there. A lot of cork trees, a lot of the world's cork production for bottles and for other things come from that region. And Muxow is a family-owned winery that has been around since the mid-1800s. And they've been owned continuously by the Reynolds family, who still owns it. They are on the 6th generation. They are incredible hosts. They make a lot of wonderful wines. But when I got there, one thing I didn't know is that they have a 900 hectare property. So it's over 2,000 acres. And wine is a very small portion of what they do. They actually have a huge cork production. They have about 1,000 organic lambs on their property. They have hundreds of hectares of olive groves, and they make amazing olive oil. They make honey, and then wine is further down on that list. So wine is probably what they're best known for, but it is like the smallest piece of their business. So I found that quite interesting. Also the current winery that they're in was built in, I think, 1907. And they've got all kinds of employees that have been there for decades. They are one of the largest employers of the region. They pay their men and women equally, which sounds crazy in today's day and age, but it is not the case, especially over in Portugal, where they are. And they pay above average wages to their employees. It was really great to visit there. When we were there, Mrs. Reynolds, the matriarch of the family, made us the best lamb dish I've ever had. So if you ever get a chance to go visit this winery, it's like a living museum. Like everything's super old, everything's super old school. They still foot stomp all of their red grapes by foot. They do it 3 or 4 times a day. It's crazy. It's so inefficient, but the wines are amazing. So
Todd, from the you were saying this is from the south and not a heavily populated part of Portugal, correct?
Yes.
Yeah. A big wine growing area? Is this where like a lot of farms are? It sounds like there could be many different kind of farms down there.
Yeah, I mean, they do a lot of agriculture down there. Cork is the main production, and then olives, and I think grapes would come after that. It is not a very famous wine producing region in Portugal, but I would describe it as up and coming. Muxow is one of the most famous and one of the exceptions because they've been around for so long, but most wineries in Alentejo have been around for less than 30 years.
Right.
This winery's been around for over 150, but that's a rare exception.
Right. And we're drinking their white. Are they predominantly a white producer, or a bit of everything?
Predominantly red. It's quite warm in that area. Reds is what they do best and what they're known for. But this white is delicious. And this is actually one of our glass pours at Oddfish right now, exclusive to our restaurant group. So really the only place you can get it right now is at Oddfish. It's not available at retail. It is a wine that I think was just built for seafood. So the nose is, fairly aromatic. It's quite youthful. I get wonderful aromas of like pear and ripe citrus. It's a great floral note on this wine. And one of the things that I love about this wine is that it's quite salty. It kind of reminds me of sea breeze. This wine is not close to the ocean. It's probably at least 100 kilometers away, but I still get this lovely saltiness, which I think bridges so well with the fresh seafood that we have at Oddfish. The palate, the wine is quite dry, really nice and fresh. Again, you get a little bit of that salty tang, the ripe lemon, apple, pear, very mineral, lovely like jasmine component that I get off of this. Super delicious. Works really well with seafood. After we record this, I'm actually going to have it with chicken noodle soup. I think it'll work well with a couple of white meats, seafood, maybe even some light cheeses. Actually, there was a local cheese that we had with this wine when I was there, and I can't recall the name. I know it's not available in Canada because I've looked, but it worked quite well with that mild Portuguese cheese as well. So super versatile, super fun, off the beaten path.
Sorry, I missed it. I'm a daydreamer. What grape is it?
So there's two grapes in this. It's called Arinto, so it's about 50-50 Arinto, and Anto Vaz, which I've actually never seen anywhere outside of this bottling. Like I said, this is red wine country, and this is kind of an oddity for them, but I think super delicious nonetheless.
And would you ever have those two grapes as standalone, or are they pretty much always mixed with something?
Arinto is quite often a standalone grape. It's one of the better known Portuguese whites. It's not just grown in Alentejo. You see it a little bit further north as well. I think they grow it in Bucelas, which is in the Lisboa region near Lisbon.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And when you're looking for wines from Europe, usually Portugal is going to be best dollar value in terms of, or is it best dollar value, or just they're going to be the lower end of the price point. Anything you look for when you look for Portuguese wines in particular? Like obviously this one is something that is a rare breed and you found it and exclusive to us, but the casual shopper, if they're looking for a white, what's one that you go, oh, that's something you should definitely try, like have your eye out for?
Well, I mean, Portuguese wines just across the board offer such value. I drank a lot of Vinho Verde when I was in Portugal, and the Portuguese drink a lot of that wine as well. It was available pretty much everywhere that we were. The wines are super affordable. We've had a couple over the last year at Oddfish as well, and they're always the least expensive wines on the menu. But that doesn't mean that they're not high quality wines. They just happen to be super affordable.
And super low in alcohol content too. Like,
yeah,
is that
11% alcohol, but like they're not underripe by any means. I mean, they're tart, fresh wines for sure. I mean, Vinho Verde translates to green wine. So they're light and they're fresh and they've got like a green hue and they're best drunk young, but that doesn't mean that they're not delicious or, that they can't have awesome complexity.
Love the fact that last month we talked about what goes well with a BLT, and this month we've already brought in chicken noodle soup. So this is fantastic. Your choice of wines are for every person.
Yeah, I mean, this is the kind of stuff that we eat normally, right? So
yeah, absolutely.
When we get to wine number 4, I'm going to talk about cheeseburgers. So
all right. you want to move to wine number two? There we go.
Wine number two, we're going to do the Roussanne from Terra Vista. So this is a winery I have not had a lot of experience working with because they're very small. They've been open for, I think, since 2009, so a dozen years or so. They make about 1,000 cases of wine per year, and that is nothing. It's minuscule. They're a boutique in every sense of the word. I was talking to the agent a few days ago, and he was telling me a little bit about their story. So they're on the Naramata Bench in the Okanagan Valley. They are run by a husband and wife team. They are very committed to sustainable farming practices. They do everything by hand. They've got solar power at the winery for some of their energy. They only use electric vehicles in their vineyards. They are primarily known for their white wines. They have dabbled in reds in the past, but it's like always super small production, and all that stuff would go directly to the wine club or sold out of the wine tasting room at the winery. This particular bottling, the Roussanne Focus Series, the 2020 vintage, they made 89 cases. So, you know, not very much wine, very, very small production. And this wine was only available to their wine club and to people that went and visited them at the winery. But I tasted it with their agent, and I really enjoyed the wine and asked if we could have some for our wine club. And they said yes. So now it's available to us. And there'll be a couple of cases left for Oddfish as well for people that want to try it. So
that's awesome. And hey, Roussanne, is that very successfully grown in Naramata?
There's not very much of it grown. I mean, one of the things that I love about the Okanagan is it's kind of like the Wild West. It's still in its infancy. And I think that a lot of the grape growers would tell you they really haven't figured out what goes best everywhere yet. So there's a lot of experimentation going. Like, for instance, Terra Vista, I just planted some Menthea, which is a Spanish grape variety, which I've never seen planted in the Okanagan before. And they've planted some Garnacha or Grenache as well, which again, I don't see very much of. That being said, the few examples of Roussanne that I have seen, I think has done quite well. Its home is in the Rhone Valley in France, where it makes much weightier wines. I mean, this wine is not light. It's about 14% alcohol, and it's medium to full bodied, as you'll see when I go through my tasting note. But it's not quite as rich as the examples I've had from the Rhone Valley in France. But one thing I will say is that because of the really hot days and the really cool nights that we get in the Okanagan, this wine and the Roussannes that I've tried have really retained their freshness. They have really good acidity, which for me, I think makes for great wines. So the examples that I've seen so far, I think, are very promising, and I hope that people continue to work with them.
Yeah, right on. Okay, and
all right, so this one on the nose is quite youthful. It's a little bit more aromatic. I would describe this as pronounced intensity, you know, fresh and ripe fruit character, you know, apricot, peach, but there's also some mandarin orange. There's a character on this, like this wine smells a lot like a peanut shell or like beer foam. And that's because this wine was aged in stainless steel tanks with the heavy lees. And when they do that, the lees are just spent yeast cells. So when the yeast eats sugar, the yeast cells will precipitate out to the bottom of the aging vessel, and they can either take those lees out or they can leave them in there to add a textural component. And then you get a flavor component as well, which presents as kind of peanut shell, beer foam, that kind of thing, right? Which I'm getting on this wine. So that's where that comes from.
Yeah, the stone fruit really jumps out for me, for sure.
Yeah, it's a riper fruit profile. It's quite aromatic. There's a lovely floral character to this as well. It kind of smells like oily or kind of resinous white flowers, quite pungent, but in a really positive way. The palate. Palate's dry. The alcohol is a little bit more prevalent on this wine than it was on the first wine. Then the texture on this wine is very oily. You know, it's very like round and creamy, which is typical for Roussanne. That's what this grape is known for. It's known for like an oilier, richer texture. But there's a freshness on this wine that pushes through, and the finish is like really lovely floral and kind of citrusy. It's not quite as ripe on the finish as it is on the nose or maybe on the initial flavor profile.
Okay, so when you get Roussanne from Europe, from France, and then you have this, is like, would you ever have Roussanne from Europe that would have the strong stone fruit, or would it pick up other things?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. That's a
Mhm.
hallmark. It's a ripe stone fruit, apricots, peaches, that kind of thing.
Okay, because when we think of Naramata and Okanagan, we get peach on a lot of things, just because of what was there previous.
Yeah, no, I think this is showing true to form, but with just a little bit more freshness. Um, it's quite common to see Roussanne aged in some oak barrels as well. This wine, I believe, I know was done completely in stainless steel. So there's just a more emphasis on the freshness of this wine, which I think is cool. As far as food pairings go, again, this would probably work really well with roasted chicken or chicken noodle soup. But I think this wine would work really well with a cheese and charcuterie plate.
Mm.
Roussanne works well with cheeses, works well with ham. So I don't see any reason why it wouldn't work well with like cured deli meats. And with
Yeah,
the Christmas season coming up, and I know that there's going to be a lot of parties happening, I think this is a great way for you to start your party with your cheese and charcuterie board.
yeah, right on. No, this 2 for 2 so far.
All right. Okay, now we're moving into one of my absolute favorite wineries, not only in Italy, but of anywhere. So Castel and Villa, really interesting story. So this wine is actually owned by a princess, Princess Coralia. She was married, and her husband and herself bought this property in the late 60s. And it was just going to be like a summer retreat for them, but then they discovered that they had some excellent terroir and decided to plant some grapes, and they hired a famous enologist to help consult and guide them in their decisions. And then in the early to mid 80s, her husband died rather unexpectedly, and she was faced with the decision: do I keep the estate? Do I sell it? But she loved it, and she took over, and she makes the wines and runs the winery. And I think she makes some of the most expressive wines in the Chianti Classico region. I think what sets her apart is that she ages her wines longer, both in the large oak botti that they have in Italy, and she ages them longer in the bottle. So this is the 2017 bottling, and it's the current release. If you look at her neighbors, they're on 18 and even 19, and I'm sure there's probably even some 2020 Chianti in the market right now. But this is 2017, and this is the current release.
Or you said oak botti. Is
Botti.
that just barrel?
Yeah, so when we think of like an oak barrel, first thing that comes to my mind is like a barrique, a French barrique, which is
Yeah.
225 liters. A botti is 5,000 to 10,000 to 12,000 liters of wine. So big. Like if I was to stand in front of it, it would be way over my head, and it's a massive barrel. It holds anywhere from 5,000 to 12,000 liters of wine. So you're getting the oxidative benefits of oak, the small amounts of oxygen exchange between the wine and the oak, but you're not getting the oak flavors. You're not picking up any of the vanilla, sweet spices that can come with new oak barrels.
Right on. And is that pretty rare for someone to use a device like this, a botti, instead of a bunch of barrels?
I think it's much more traditional to use the old botti in Italy, but there are a lot of producers that are moving to barrique or doing a hybrid of the two. But yeah, tradition is with the old wooden botti.
Yeah. And and when you said that, she just released her 2017 and everyone else is on the 2018, 2019, isn't it every vintner's ideal to hold back like that? Do you need bankroll to be able to do that? And or like, what's the motivating factor? Is it true that they would all love to see like 4 or 5 years age before they release something?
Chianti is one of those minefields where you can have, you've got Chianti, then you've got Chianti Classico, which is what this is, and then you've got Chianti Reserva and Gran Selezione. But the underlining word is Chianti, and you can have Chianti that's $7.99 and you can have Chianti that's $120. So it's hard for consumers to say, well, why is this wine $8 on the shelf and why is this one 120? Not all Chiantis are built for the cellar, and not all of them need cellar aging. I've had $8 Chiantis in this market that are delicious. I mean, they're simple, they're quaffable. You drink them at the beach or, you know, at a picnic, and they're awesome. This wine is definitely more serious and can definitely age longer if you wanted it to. So the other thing is that you mentioned the bankroll, and yes, I believe that the owners of this winery are independently wealthy of their winery. So I think, you know, they can afford to hold their wines back so that they show how they want them to show, right?
Yeah.
They hold back their Chianti Reservas much longer. I believe the current release for their Chianti Reserva is 2013, so 8 years old, right? You know, you got to be able to hold a lot of inventory and a lot of money. But it's cool because her wines, while they are more expensive than her neighbors, I don't think they're that much more expensive. And I think the quality that's in the bottle definitely justifies it. So,
and that's you know, what you said about Chianti could be such a broad range of quality, and I think I shop when I go into a wine store. I definitely want to go into a wine store that, you know, the people, you know, more of a boutique wine store, or you find your local liquor store that actually has that gut person on the floor that really does know. And there are some of them in some of the government liquor stores, so people really do know what they're talking about, and other people, you know, don't. But I find myself, it's kind of like in a record store, because I like buying a lot of soul and funk, and especially the funk. I like getting compilations, and so I'm in there with my phone googling stuff and getting reviews and all that stuff. And I'm the same when it's wine buying time. If I can't find someone that I really do trust, I'm googling like crazy, because, you know, like you said, there could be a $12 bottle of Chianti in there that's actually exceptional, you know?
Yeah, I mean, getting to know the people where you shop is ideal. You know, I personally do a lot of my shopping. I'll give a shout out to Marquee Wine Cellars. They have great staff. You know, John and his team there are, you know, really dedicated to their craft, and all the staff there are super knowledgeable. So yeah, you know, if you want to learn more about wine, find a wine shop where you're comfortable talking to the staff that have knowledge, and they'll guide you in the right direction. And don't be afraid to tell them, yeah, I don't want to spend more than, you know, 15 or 20 bucks on a bottle of wine, because I know I certainly don't want to spend more than that sometimes. And yeah, they know their product, and they know what to sell you. So yeah, tell them how much you want to spend, and they'll find you the best bottle of wine in your price point.
Okay, yeah, I have a challenge for them. I got $5.
So this wine is incredibly aromatic, and this wine is starting to show a little bit of development already. The fruit is ripe, but it's also starting to dry out a little bit, which is indicative of age. It's very perfumed. There's lots of red berry fruit, beautiful floral character. There's like dried rose petals and lilacs. A little bit of
brightness to this, hey?
Oh yeah, this wine's incredibly expressive, which I got to say is not always typical of Castel and Villa's wines. Even their Chianti Classico, this is their entry-level wine. And quite often their wines can take a couple of years to really start becoming expressive. They can really be quite closed when you first buy them. But this vintage, the 2017 vintage, is expressive right out of the gate. I probably would not have picked the 16 or even the 15 to put in the wine club right now, because I quite frankly don't think that they're ready to drink. I have an entire case of 2016, which I haven't opened yet, because I don't think that it's ready. I think it still needs a few years. So sorry, sidetrack. So we've got all those floral characters. There's lead pencil. There's saddle leather. There's iron. There's cinnamon. There's a lot going on in here.
You know, a few things that you said were obviously the obvious, like cinnamon, but it takes a lot of training, a lot of drinking, and a lot of hanging out with people in the know to pick up on saddle leather, you know?
You know, wines as they age, they pick up secondary characters. And I find that leather is like a common thread. We're going to taste it in the Free Mark Abbey as well, which is a slightly older bottling. It's 2014. Yeah, wines as they age, they pick up, more dried fruit characters. They pick up more earthy, spicy characters, and leather seems to be something I pick up a lot in aged red wines, and this wine certainly has it. The palate, this wine is very, very dry. It's very austere. It's got a lot of tannin. It's really drying out the inside of my mouth, but it's super fresh at the same time. It's got, medium plus body. There's moderate alcohol, a very lean texture. The finish is wonderful. Pushes through like quite spicy and savory. This is not necessarily a wine that people would want to drink on its own, right? I personally think it's wonderful, but I think that this is definitely a wine that was built for food. And I think it's safe for us to talk about the food portion of our
yeah, for sure,
tasting club. So this month, the options are braised beef short ribs with red wine and roasted potatoes, or the vegetarian option is cannellonis filled with ricotta and spinach with the tomato sauce and a little Parmesan. And I think this wine is going to work perfectly with both of those dishes. Yeah, because of that tannic structure, because it's so fierce and drying, you want something with a little bit of fat. So, the braised beef short ribs or the cheese from the cannelloni, I think, is going to do the trick.
Yeah. Yeah, this is so obvious when you taste it how dry it is. It's you actually get a little tingle in the tongue, and I could feel like the outsides of my tongue actually dry. That was very fast.
Yeah, but a great wine built for the table, and yeah, I hope everyone else loves it as much as I do, because I think this wine's fantastic. All right, so moving on to wine number 4, which is the Free Mark Abbey. This wine has a really cool story. This wine was started in 1886, so this, it's quite old by Napa standards. It was another case of a couple starting a winery and the husband dying early and prematurely and quite suddenly. In 1886, I'm not sure when the husband died, but it was not too long after the winery started. So it was still the 1800s. To say that it was not common to see women winemakers would be an understatement. But yeah, Free Mark Abbey had the first woman winemaker in California. They were the 7th bonded winery in either Napa or California. I can't recall, but they were one of the first. It did become an empty winery for a little bit, and then it was purchased by a new family, taken over. Now this winery is owned by the Kendall Jackson family of wineries. But to me, they make some of the most classic kind of old school Napa Valley wines. The wines definitely have like the fruit intensity that you expect from California, but they retain the freshness and the kind of structure. They're not big, massive fruit bombs, and not that there's anything wrong with those kinds of wines, but this is definitely more old school Napa Valley.
Hey, when you said it was an empty winery for some time, they essentially just let it grow wild. Is that what happened?
Yeah, I can't remember the history at that point in time, but it kind of fell into hard times, and then the winery was abandoned.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, but
and what's the big risk there if you do let vines go for like 5 years plus? Will they get unwieldy? Will they go over the place? Will they die? Like, what's going to happen? Or are they actually going to get stronger?
I think that I'm not an enologist. I know that it's quite often to see vineyards abandoned in Europe during times of hardship. I think they just become overgrown. I mean, vines are plants, and if they're not, so think about if you just ignored your garden for 5 years, what would happen, right? There'd be weeds everywhere. Your plants would become unwieldy. They'd grow wherever they wanted to, and vines are no exception. So I think that the vines carry on, but they just become like thick and overgrown, and it takes a lot of TLC to get them back to where they need
right.
to. You can get tractors through the vines, and
yeah, and you would need to cut them back in a big way, or else the fruit's going to be weak, right?
Yeah.
That's the whole idea. Yeah.
So but yeah, they're in good hands now. Yeah, they make fantastic wines. So we carried this wine by the glass at Oddfish last year and the year before. This is 2014. We actually, when we decided we were going to do the wine club, earlier this year. One of the first things I did was I held back some of this wine for Wine Club because I really wanted to showcase it. I think the wine's tremendous value. Since we've bought it, this wine has actually gone up in price quite a bit, by like 25% a bottle. So we've got a nice back vintage here with the 2014 vintage. On the nose, this is probably the most aromatic of all four wines that we've tried today. The fruit is ripe, verging on overripe, with a slightly drying of the fruit. I get a lot of blue and black berry fruit character. And then there's a lot of spice here. I'm getting vanilla bean, I'm getting vanilla extract, I'm getting cocoa, I'm getting cola, coconut, and that's coming from the oak aging. The Freemark Abbey and most wineries in Napa Valley use 25 or 225 liter French barriques to age their wine. I know Freemark Abbey will sometimes use American oak as well, which can give a slightly riper spice component. So that's why we're getting vanilla bean and vanilla extract. I think some of that coconut flavor is also coming from the American oak. But there's an earthy component to this as well.
Yeah, and when you're with these notes on the nose, is this more typical of Merlot grown in California, Merlot in particular, or of actually what's going on with the vinifying process with the different oaks that you mentioned?
So Merlot in general will have more dark fruit than red fruit, and I think that that's quite typical. And in terms of oak, I think French oak is definitely more common. American oak, you really don't see. Well, you never see it in France. You wouldn't see it in Italy generally, where there can be some Merlot grown. You really only see it for Merlot in the United States, and there's really a small proportion of wine growers that use it. The reason that the oak profiles are so different is, where American oak is grown in the United States, it's quite hot. And so all the flavors you get from French oak are then kind of dialed up to 11, right? Mm-hmm. So instead of vanilla bean, you get vanilla extract. Instead of like softer spices, like everything's just dialed up and it's much more in your face, mm-hmm. right? Instead of cedar, you're getting like dill and coconut and things like that. And it can offer wonderful flavor. It's like a spice cabinet for your wine, and you're just seasoning the wine with these flavors that you get from the oak barrel. But I think this wine is typical of a Merlot from California, with the dark fruit and the sweet spices. The texture of this wine is quite round and opulent. Merlot always has like a rounder, richer texture, which is why it's quite often blended with Cabernet Sauvignon, because Cabernet Sauvignon can be more powerful wine, but on the mid palate, it can be a little bit hollow sometimes. So they blend in a little bit of Merlot to kind of fill that hollow point of the wine.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And what do you say to people that say they don't like Merlot, probably because they watch Sideways one too many times and they want to be like Miles?
Well, anybody that's seen Sideways knows that at the end of the movie, he drinks a wine that's Merlot based, or has a lot of Merlot in it. I agree with Miles that Merlot can make very boring, bland wines, and it can also make very interesting wines, such as the one that we've got in our glass. I think Merlot makes exceptional wines. It certainly makes some of the most expensive wines in the world if you start looking at Bordeaux. So I think there's something to it. But
yeah.
What else can I tell you about this wine? Yeah, there's a richness to this, and there's a tannic structure as well. But the tannics for me, the tannins are a lot more polished on this wine than they were in the Chianti, right? They're just a little bit more supple. They're a little bit more round. They're a little bit more tamed.
They are, because you get that tannic nature. You get the stiffness at the end, but most certainly it does not dry out like that Chianti. That was like very drying for sure.
Whereas the Chianti was quite lean in texture. This one's round and creamy. The fruit is more opulent. I think this wine will go very nicely with the beef short ribs. I think it'll work just wonderfully with the cannelloni as well because of the tannin, but it's quite fresh. And talking about like comfort food and stuff that we, eat more on a regular basis, this wine with like, a burger with cheddar cheese on it, I think it's going to be exceptional. Also, I think that this wine would be wonderful with turkey dinner. So if somebody wants like a lovely rich red to go with Christmas dinner,
Yeah.
I think this is going to be excellent. One thing I should mention, and maybe we can edit this to the beginning of the video, is this wine needs to be decanted simply because it has a ton of sediment. So if you pour this right out of the bottle and you don't decant it, your wine's going to be cloudy. It's going to have a ton of sediment in it because of the age, right? Sediment is a natural occurrence in red wines when they're aged. As red wines age, some of the color pigment starts to precipitate out, and it presents at the bottom of the bottle as sediment. So it's a totally natural thing, but and it doesn't really taste like anything, but it does change the texture of the wine. So it's going to be a little bit gritty, and nobody wants to drink gritty wine. If you do, fill your boots, but if you don't, I would decant the wine. And sorry, I should have mentioned earlier.
No, but is that a conscious decision by the vintner to not knock out some of that sediment and stuff like that, or is that just? Is this a smart? Well, obviously, it's a smart thing to do because that's what they did. But some wines are unfiltered per se, and does sediment fall in the same category as being unfiltered and that chunkiness that you get in some wines?
I don't think this wine is filtered. I think what wineries will do is some wineries, rather than filter their wines because they feel it's going to strip some of the character of the wines, is they'll let the wine sit in a settling tank for a couple of weeks and let a lot of the sediment precipitate to the bottom. And then they'll gently siphon the wine off of the top, leaving the heavy solids in the bottom. And then when they get close, they'll cut it. And then that's how they can get away without filtering. I personally don't mind if people filter their wines lightly, especially if for wines that are meant to be consumed young, and if they're going to be poured by the glass in our restaurants, because, we don't want to decant every single bottle, get the sediment off before we pour a glass for one of our guests. I think it's very impractical. And I honestly don't think that, it's stripping away too much for, the big expensive bottles where there's going to be a lot of pomp and circumstance, and you're going to keep it in your cellar for 20 years. And then you're going to take it out and decanting it. And you've maybe bought one bottle or two bottles or three bottles. I think it's totally fine to, expect that consumers are going to want to decant those wines. But most wines in the world, I can't remember what the statistic is, but I think it's like 95% of all wines are consumed within 48 hours of being purchased.
Right. Absolutely.
So, I don't think it's a bad thing to filter some of your wines.
You should almost be in the wine store and not telling them about what you want to eat, but just say, I'm in the mood that I'm in right now. So what goes well with my mood?
Yeah. Right.
All right. Any parting comments on the collection of 4 wines? Because this these are quite different wines, and quite different stories. I love it.
Yeah, I just wanted to present some wines that I thought were cool, that I personally think are delicious. And I'd love to get everyone else's feedback. So, I mean, the first month we did was fantastic, and we got a lot of great feedback, and keep it coming. Let us know what you liked, what you didn't like, what you'd like to see more of, because at the end of the day, this is for you guys. So let us know what you like so that we can keep putting out awesome wines for you.
And they can also tell us musical requests, because both, as I think this, both Todd and I love our music, and Todd has a pretty serious guitar collection too, and some stories behind his guitars. And so when I was at the start, after we did the first one, I said, okay, what do we want to do for music? Do you want to do just random stuff? And straight away Todd said, let's do covers. So you're getting covers this month, which has been an enjoyable journey for the two of us, because straight away I said, Todd, send me some pics. And of course, like 3 hours later, he had sent me a number of pics already. And then I obsess over things as I do. So our initial playlist is now 8 hours of cover songs, and we have to pare it down. And I listen to it in my car endlessly, trying to remember how I want to start things and this and that. Todd, is there a cover that you chose that you absolutely love? And I sorry, I didn't even prep you on this, but do you remember any of the songs that you sent me that you're like, this will always be one of my favorite covers?
I mean, what did I put on the list? I think I love listening to covers done by artists that I really like. So what I mean is like probably my favorite cover, which I don't even know if I put on there because I didn't know if it would flow with what we were looking for this particular playlist. But Bob Dylan wrote a song called "Don't Think Twice," and it was covered in like 1999 by Mike Ness, who's the singer for Social Distortion, and he did an album called what was it called? Anyways, he covered "Don't Think Twice," and he did like a rockabilly version of it. And I really love it when like, you know, I love Bob Dylan, I love Social Distortion and Mike Ness, so I love it when like artists I like cover other artists I really like. So yeah, if I had to pick one cover, I think "Don't Think Twice," originally by Bob Dylan, done by Mike Ness, is probably the one.
Well, I'm probably going to give everyone a 2-hour playlist, so it can definitely get in there because by the end of 2 hours, you might be ready for it'll be on the tail end. We won't lead with that.
Yeah, probably not.
But you know, kind of similar to what you said for me is that for me choosing cover songs, I can't let myself fall in the trap of having someone cover a song that is quite identical. I want them to rearrange it. Either tempo or the musical instruments that they use. Because if it's just their voice and I kind of like their voice better, well, that's just kind of cheating. It's not cheating, but it's like, well, it's not enough that I go, you know, it's almost like when I was explaining having really good tequila, and this is a terrible segue, but you know, the really, really wonderful tequilas that I love tasting, experiencing, they're more of a, like, it's all about them sitting in different casks, a sherry cask, and it's actually having something that is an incredible taste. And then you're like, oh, this is tequila. It's not like it's tequila right off the bat. It's one of those things where this is a complex drink, and you're like, oh yeah, this is definitely tequila. Oh, I'm getting all this. And for me, listening to a cover song, a lot of times it's that, you know, it starts off, you're like, God, this sounds, oh, it's that song. Like I really do want them to rearrange and reimagine it. So a lot of my choices on this are going to be things that it might be a goofy reinterpretation, but and it might be a reggae version. It's just something that you go, oh, okay, it's that. Yes, of course it's that song, but it wouldn't hit you straight away. So I don't know. We'll see. It might be a total failure, and it might be just self-indulgent on our parts, but
it'll be fun nonetheless.
Exactly. Have some more wine.
Yeah.
All right. Well, I think that's a wrap. That was once again incredibly informative, and hopefully I didn't ask too many stupid questions. But man, every time you talk, it's like, what does that mean? And it's endless, the stories that you have and the associations you have with these people. It's amazing that you got to hang out with the vintners in Portugal on their 700-hectare farm and have lamb with them and see this process.
Yeah, I got to foot stomp grapes for the first time when I was there. That was a trip, a whole other story. But yeah, if you ever get a chance to go to Portugal, go visit Funchal. It's about a 2-hour drive from Lisbon. It's definitely worth going down there. And like, this is their entry level whites. Their iconic red Tonel 3-4, which they make, you know, a couple hundred bottles of every 3 or 4 years. Yeah, their wines are exceptional. So
that's awesome. Okay, my friend, we will see you later.
Yeah. Enjoy the holidays. We'll see you next year.
Yeah. And yeah, thank you very much for taking part. And yeah, we'll see you next year. See you later.